Vitruvian. Alright guys, thank you so much for coming to Vitruvian Man. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. We're going to be taking a look at an interview between Jordan Peterson and Michael Dyson. Let's do this.
Having said, I'll end by saying this. The great American philosopher Beyonce Knowles said that it has been said that racism is so American that if you challenge racism, you look like you're challenging America. We are challenging inequality. We are challenging the refusal to see me as an individual. When we overcome that, have at it, we're all on equal plane.
Alright, so let's take a look at Michael Dyson here. Now, he's coming clearly from a collective mind state using public opinion of a particular famous star, such as Beyonce, which has approval with women. So he's using a romanticism argument here. A romanticism argument, and then he's romanticizing her as a philosopher, great philosopher, Beyonce Knowles, etc. Which is not only that, a mischaracterization. Obviously an image creation, which immediately he begins this part of this debate with an image creation. And it's a result of a collective-minded type of approach. Then we're going to discover this a little bit more as we continue to look. But keep in mind that this comes from a collective-minded approach and using public opinion and others to collect a particular amount of people, which is really the actual factor of division. Then he talks about how racism is sort of American thing. Obviously not. You know, racism is actually a form of division. And it's when the collective mindedness comes together and isolates, which is what all collective mindedness do, such as groups, tribalisms, societies and nations and so on. When they become collective minded type, they are divisive. And as a result, they compare themselves to the other and oppose the other, thus create all sorts of conflicts with the other. And this is how it works. This is what we are seeing here and experiencing this as we were watching. So let's go ahead and continue to see how this is dealt with. And
no, I think it's fine.
Good.
I think
This
it's
is good.
fine.
The pot is getting stirred here.
So I've got a couple of questions.
So let's your side spoke, so I'm going to go to Jordan, then to you,
Let's
Michelle.
assume for a moment that I've benefited from my white privilege. Okay, so let's assume that. That's
a good
fine.
assumption.
That's what you would say. So, so let's say, here, let's get precise about this, okay?
Was that very individual of you?
Let's get precise about this, okay?
Let's get precise.
To what degree?
So here it is before Jordan gets into what he's saying. Okay, so see how Jordan immediately caught on to what we just talked about, which is the collective mindedness, meaning he's going to have a predictable pattern reactions, and you're going to see a bunch of predictable patterned reactions as a result of the collective mindedness. This only happens really with collective mindedness people, because here it is him reacting to Jordan Peterson saying, hey, you're collective minded, this is what you would say, this is how you are, this is a and he's like, ooh, that's a good point, let's go ahead and let's do that, let's go ahead and let's do this is great. So here it is.
Degree is my present level of attainment or achievement a consequence of my white privilege? And I don't mean sort of. I mean, do you mean 5%? Do you mean 15%? Do you mean 25%? Do you mean 75%? And what do you propose I do about it? How about a tax? How about a tax that's like specialized for me so that I can account for my damn privilege, so that I can stop hearing about it?
There it is. There it is. You know, typical, predictable behavior, which he's not aware of he's exhibiting, and Jordan Peterson beautifully baits him into this. And it's ironic that people clap who can't really see this happening, and they're clapping. And he's particularly highlighting the fact that he proves his point. Peterson does this pretty well, but he's not doing it intentionally, which is really great. That's really the only way to be done in this situation, is he's not doing it intentionally. It's just arising out of the way he's presenting himself. And this clearly shows up in his collective mind state, indicating that yes, he does agree with that white people should be taxed for the privilege they have. So here we go.
Let's get precise about one other thing, okay? We'll get precise about one other thing. Now,
Precise.
yeah, precise, yes. And so, if we can agree, and we haven't, that the left can go too far, which it clearly can, then how would my worthy opponents precisely define when the left that they stand for has gone too far? You didn't like equity, equality of outcome. I think that's a great marker. But if you have a better suggestion and won't sidestep the question, so let's figure out how I can dispense with my white privilege, and so that you can tell me when the left has gone too far, since they clearly can. And that's what this debate is about political correctness. It's about the left going too far. And I think it's gone too far in many ways. And I'd like to figure out exactly how and when, so the reasonable left could make its ascendance again and we could quit all this nonsense.
Okay, Michelle, go for
Do you mind if I answer, Stephen? I will answer you, but I just want to answer Stephen Fry first, because you talked about, this is how we got Trump, and this is the failure of the left. And so I'm a journalist. I went to a ton of Trump rallies during the campaign in different...
Okay, so here it is. Here we go. Entrance of a journalist. Now, immediately she frames herself as, I'm a journalist. What that implies on the basis of the psyche is that she's coming into this conversation with predictable psyche of educational and experienced background of a perspective she views as herself in authority in, such as I've done this, and I've been to a lot of these, so I know. So she's coming into it with this authoritarian sort of perspective, which obviously doesn't look authoritarian, but just pay attention. Then you see her framing herself as with Trump. Now, let's understand what journalism really is. Journalism is the art of essentially moderating and saying, agreeing with everyone and not agreeing with no one, really. It's meaningless linguistical babble, which originally was reshaped by Bernays. They like to get emotional reactions going because emotional reactions sells their programs. And they love the Trump thing, so Trump is on their mind, it's on their psyche. So she's immediately entering in with the thing that's the foremost associated to her, I'm a journalist, and the thing that's on her psyche, which is relatable to the emotional reactions that are usually drawn out of what her job is about and what the people like Trump have effect in, such as the media and using the media and so on. So she's immediately entering with herself as a journalist, and let's take a look at what's going on next.
Different parts of the country, and you're right. Everywhere I went, I heard complaints about political correctness. Far more than I heard complaints about, say, NAFTA. But when you asked people what they meant by political correctness, they called a woman they worked with girl, and she got mad at them. And they could, you couldn't in public wonder aloud whether the president of the United States was really a Muslim. They didn't like that they couldn't make gay jokes anymore. And so on the one hand, you're right, and I've written about this. I think that when you try to, that when people have these prejudices and you try to suppress them, it can create a kind of dangerous counter-reaction. But I also think that, what they were reacting to, again, to go back to the title of this debate, what they called political correctness, the fact that they had to have this urbane black president who they felt talked down to them, which is really what they meant. I don't see a way around that, because that is, like I said, that's progress.
So here it is. So we have a progressive maybe. If really that's at all an opinion she holds, that's not a public opinion she's just displaying in agreement with for the purposes of moderation. But here we go, her reframing the situation of nothing at all what Jordan Peterson said. And she's reframing this and pointing it towards the conservatives and their criticisms of Obama and being talked down to, and that this is basically a effect of progress. So she's actually acting in the form of suppression here in a very subtle way, censorship in a very subtle way, implying that, well, this is progress, put up with it, essentially. Then she's essentially circumventing this situation into a way where she's alleviating herself from being criticized or seen or perceived in a negative light, because most people won't really see this moderate approach. So she's agreeing sort of with both sides, and then she's going to go ahead and give an explanation of this. So go ahead.
So to go to the question of when the left goes too far, I mean, to me, it's pretty easy: violence and censorship, right? I'm against violence, and I'm against censorship. But I also, looking around the world right now.
So she's reflecting, obviously, on herself. So keep in mind, a lot of what's going on with many of the people here, you'll see that when they're speaking like this, they're reflecting on themselves. So here it is.
Now, when the idea that there is this, I understand again that there is like a problem of kind of left-wing annoyance, right? There's a lot of things that kind of random people on the internet in particular are able to swarm individuals and turn kind of stray remarks into social media campaigns, and this is often, conflated with
political correctness. That's what she said. Okay, so she's saying random people. Actually, none of this is random. Everything that's being done has been done for about 80 years now, and has been very finely tuned and worked out. And all that is happening is being exacerbated in the social media aspect, because the way social media is being used. And so you have that aspect, and it's not random people. There's a specific approach and a systemization and a pattern of behavior to this that isn't like random people, as she's like to say, oh, just jumping random people and this and that. No, it's quite a lot more complex than that. So she's trying to basically moderate that situation and basically spin it, really, to say it's all these people, but really, if you look at it, it's the media, it's the journalism, it's them actually doing it that are inflicting these sort of projections and images. And this is what she's implying, that it's sort of random and this and that. No, this has been well known for years. This has been predicted. This has been written about, actually, quite well, extensively. Do your own research, you'll see it. But this is obviously not something new, and this is no phenomena.
And it's a bad phenomenon. I wish there was a way to put an end to it. I don't think there is no way to put an end to it simply by having kind of reasonable liberals or reasonable socialists denounce it, because it's just a kind of awful phenomenon of modern life. And if you want to have a debate about whether social media is terrible for democracy, I will be on the yay side. But right now...
So there you go. You have immediately an admission of censorship. Clearly, look, social media is not bad for the world. It's the way it's being used. Everything the way it's being used can be bad for you. I mean, but the truth is, even poison from a snake can actually be used to cure you. So, you have to understand that this is not this is this whole aspect of, well, this is bad, I'll be on the, this is bad for democracy. She's immediately implying a form of control or suppression or oppression or misdirection towards something that is not really the root cause of it, but that's being used as a tool for the root cause of that psychological behavior. So again, she's contradicting herself, and clearly keep in mind that when people like her make these arguments, they're projecting themselves. They tell the truth about themselves, then they project the contra. They project the truth about themselves by saying, I'm not this, and then the contra shows that they are. So here we go.
Now, where I really disagree, well, there's a couple places I really disagree.
Pick
but
one and then I'm going to go to Michael.
But the idea that the radical left poses a greater threat than the radical right, when you see actual fascism ascendant all over the world, strikes me as something that you can literally only believe if you spend your life on college campuses.
Mm-hmm. So, Mike, I want to come to you on those. Great, Michelle. On
again, that was actually a sort of support for the conservatives, but again, it's erroneously placed by stating you can only believe this. So it's actually a judgment on colleges and a deflection of where it actually is occurring and how it's actually occurring, and only believe. I mean, it's again in more sort of dramatized and emotional way of kind of stating this, and only believe, as you can see in the tone.
Jordan's point about how does he, in a sense, get an equal voice in this debate back if it is implied that his participation brings with it this baggage of white privilege that doesn't allow him to see clearly the issues that are before us.
But that is to be complicit in the very problem itself terminologically. You're beginning at a point that's already productive and controversial. You're saying, how can he get his equality back? Who are you talking about? Jordan Peterson, trending #1 on Twitter? Jordan Peterson, with an international bestseller? I want him to tweet something out about me in my book. Jordan Peterson, right? This is what I'm saying to you. Why the rage, bruh? You're doing well, but you're a mean, mad white man. And you're
All right, so I guess this is the kind of part of it that he's looking to inflict. The mean, mad white man. All right, so he's obviously envious of Jordan, and he's doing so well. His book's doing so well. He has a book to sell, and he wants to make money as well. But he's trying to do it by sending himself to hell. So whatever poetry he's trying to come up with, but basically he's using essentially Jordan Peterson, which I think Jordan is pretty well aware of, not to make this so much so in a way where he'll be used to promote him, because that's what he's doing here right now. And he's projecting onto Jordan Peterson an image against him, insulting him. He's actually insulting him right now. It's quite interesting how no one really sees that. This is the type of person who is the type of person who will sit on your table at a restaurant, not tip you, be mean to you in a nice way, and then walk away. That's the same kind of psyche you have with this kind of a person. Is most people assume that everybody's just all mean type of behavior is associated to Trump style behavior. No, that's not, saying anything and being whatever and just saying whatever, insulting, I don't care, whatever. Being mean is a lot more subtle in people who have PR that they have to control or contrast with the image that they want to be seen in public light. So they'll go about this in a completely different way where it won't be seen like that. And so they're very cunning at doing that. And for most people that don't see it, they just don't see it. But clearly here, he's actually insulting him. And he's jealous of him. He's trying to sell his book. And he's making an image of him against him. And here we go.
Gonna get us right. And I have never seen so much wine and snowflaking. There's enough wine in here to start a vineyard. And what I'm saying to you empirically and precisely, when you ask the question about white privilege, the fact that you ask it in the way you did, dismissive, pseudoscientific, non-empirical, and without justification, the truth is that white privilege doesn't act according to
Okay, so I have to stop this only because his mind state right now is so fragmented and cut up in a couple of different ways. So he's not connecting anything. So I'm gonna have to connect it for you to understand, because he's not aware of this happening either. So he's bringing up the word pseudoscientific, using a bunch of words which really have no meaning together. Empirical, non-empirical, pseudoscientific, which is really actually the art he's engaged in, and he's going to use some words like quantum or something like that, which again is a completely way of him highlighting and showing himself actually, and in reflection of what he's tossing at him. Now look at his body, just the way he's postured right now. You could see that he's not talking to anyone. He's mostly engaged in interpsychological, interneural exchange between the thought patterns in his mind right now that he's trying to correctly enunciate and express. So you could see that in his physicality right now completely in this particular picture we have right in front, which is good timing in my case. And you can see that, and you can see his psyche, and you can see he's actually not talking to anyone. Every time he brings up a point, he actually is not even talking to the crowd. He's not talking to anyone. He's like inwardly talking to himself, but speaking loud. So keep in mind of what the next part of it goes.
Quantifiable segments. It's about the degree to which we are willing as a society to grapple with the ideals of freedom, justice, and equality upon which it's based. Number two, what's interesting to me, you're talking about not having a collective identity. What do you call a nation? Are you Canadian? Are you Canadian by yourself? Are you an individual, or are you part of a group? When America formed its union, it did so in opposition to another group. So the reality is that those who are part of group identities in politics deny the legitimacy.
Okay, so I mean, again, take a look at this, how he's trying to frame Jordan Peterson by saying that you can't think freely if you're in a group, or collective mindedness if you're a part of a group. That's erroneous and incorrect. You can live in a country and still have your own thinking outside of the collective perspective of the group. So he's basically saying, get in your group, get in your, be in your image, get in the box. Essentially, he's trying to frame and put Jordan Peterson in a box, and essentially implying to him that, again, this is again him highlighting and showing his collective limited mindedness with crafty verbiage, with as a writer or whatever he calls himself to be, I guess, more like propaganda to a certain degree. But he's craftily trying to say that. Then he's trying to switch it now on the U.S., which is again erroneous on how things were formed. Things were not formed on the basis that people knew exactly what they were doing back then. Not all aspects of colonialism colonialism started in the same way, but it's just that when people live with each other, it's a problem. So let's take a look at example for, let's say you have a wife or roommates or people you've lived with in the past. If you didn't get along, you guys would fight and argue and conflict with each other, and you would have the opportunity to leave the house or the apartment or whatever, or get a divorce. But when you can't do any of that, and you live in this world, which is our land to share, and you live in this particular world, and you are in a particular place, and you can't really get along with the other, you can't just leave. So it doesn't work that way. It results into conflict, violence, and adjustments in particular things that occur based off of the relationships that they have with each other. And also, you have to understand tribalism. We have a lot of tribalism now, but back then, there was a lot of tribalism. And tribalism was very conflicting, warlike, in between tribe war with each other, all different kinds of tribes, all different kinds of beliefs. It's a lot of stuff to deal with. It's a lot of stuff to deal with now. Okay, it's complicated as it is now, and it was complicated back then as well. So you have to understand that these things don't just arise out of thin air. People don't just, it's not like people came here going, oh yeah, let's go ahead and just slaughter everybody here. It's not like that other people were complicit. Slaves were, people from Africa were complicit in enslaving people that were used as slaves here in the U.S. that were of their own same blood type or whatever. But association. So you have to understand that this is much more complicating than this gentleman here, if I can even call him a gentleman at this moment. He's very ungentlemanlike. But he's framing this, again botched, two botched things together, which shows he's fragmented minded. And you can see now the way he's erroneously stating these things, and then trying to throw Jordan Peterson into this, who's not even from America, by the way. So keep in mind what goes next.
And validity of those groups, and the fact that they have been created thusly, and then have resentment against others. All I'm asking for is the opportunity. The quotation you talk about, the difference between equality of outcome and equality of opportunity, that's a staid and retried argument, hackneyed phrase derived from the halcyon days of the debate over affirmative action. Are you looking for outcomes that can be determined equally, or are you looking for opportunity? If you free a person after a whole long time of oppression and say now you are free to survive, if you have no skills, if you have no quantifiable means of existence, what you have done is liberated them into oppression. And all I'm suggesting to you, Lyndon Baines Johnson, one of our great presidents, said, if you start...
Okay, he's again botching it, so excuse me for cutting him off, but you're not gonna really understand it if he makes no sense if you connect what he's saying versus what's actually implied. So what he's actually talking about here in Lyndon Johnson and this and that. So he's talking about, okay, he's talking about freedom back then. So you basically freed a bunch of people, right? There's two different kinds of freedom. There's a psychological freedom and there's psychological slavery, excuse me, and the physical slavery. So blacks got freed from chains. However, the psychological slavery still continued, which resulted in the incapacity of growth and learning, because that's what happens when you feel enslaved inwardly. You don't learn your way out of the condition, because the psychological condition of the slavery still exists. Sort of like the phones are wireless forms of slavery. Should you be attached to it constantly, it becomes like another arm. And so if you have physical chains do the same thing. They make you feel like they're always there, and that whole remnant of it is kind of there, and it's carried through. Now he's saying that somehow people are completely entitled, just because they're white, to carry the burden of something they weren't even alive for, or even existed in this region of the country because they could have been from somewhere else, which is where a lot of people really are. So he's saying that all of us, essentially, from other places who even weren't here, have to bear the burden, be taxed because of our race, which is racism. So he himself is basically stating that this is essentially our fault as well. And that these people who were enslaved can't figure things out themselves so well, so much so that you need to do more for them, and that those people need to do more for them specifically, which is entitlement. And to do more for them, when everything can be done for yourself now at this particular age, is you can educate, teach yourself, do so much more on your own, even better than school, even better than any other places. And you may not get the privileges, you may not get all of the other things involved with it, but you're gonna have lots of different other complications regarding that. But if you can't do things yourself, you can't be free. It's the ultimate point of slavery, to be able to be free from slavery, to be able to do things for yourself. And so he's saying, don't do things for yourself. Other people should have figured it out and done it for you and resolved it. He's saying, be a slave. Oh, this is so easy.
A man in a race 100 years behind, it is awfully difficult to catch up. So I don't think Jordan Peterson is suffering from anything except an exaggerated sense of entitlement and resentment, and his own privilege is invisible to him, and it's manifest with lethal intensity and ferocity right here on stage.
Lethal intensity and ferocity is only exhibited in his psychological behavior and the way he's framing himself, when really, you look at it, Peterson is actually very calm, very composed, not in any way exhibited of that. And he's trying to draw that out of him in some ways. And ferocity and using words. I mean, do you even know what ferocity is? A lion is ferocious. You can't even put ferocity in the same sentence with Peterson. Only this guy and his conflicting ways that he's again projecting onto himself while he's talking to himself, so keep in mind.
Jordan, I'm going to have to let you respond to that if you will.
Well, what I derive from that series of rebuttals, let's say, is twofold. The first is that saying that the radical left goes too far when they engage in violence is not a sufficient response by any stretch of the imagination, because there are sets of ideas in radical leftist thinking that led to the catastrophes of the 20th century, and that was at the level of idea, not at the level of violent action. It's a very straightforward thing to say you're against violence. It's like being against poverty. It's like, you know, generically speaking, decent people are against poverty and violence. It doesn't address the issue in the least. And with regards to my privilege or lack thereof, I mean, I'm not making the case that I haven't had advantages in my life and disadvantages in my life like most people. You don't know anything about my background or where I came from, and it doesn't matter to you because fundamentally I'm a mean white man. That's a hell of a thing to say in a debate.
Let me just say,
Very, very brief, because I want to move on to men and women. A good topic next.
The mean mad white comment was not predicated upon my historical excavation of your past. It's based upon the evident vitriol with which you speak and the denial of a sense of equanimity among combatants in an argument. So I'm saying again, you're a mean mad white man, and the viciousness is evident.
I mean, look how mean he looks and mad and vicious he looks right away in his physical behavior. So he's physicalizing everything he's really saying about himself, really. It's too obvious. I mean, Peterson is not at all being mean to him. He's actually really polite. I gotta give it off to him. I would crush him. I'd just destroy him. I'd probably make him cry up on that stage. Not that I'd want to, but there's no pity in this guy. He's clearly using him, Peterson, to sell his book. He has absolutely no truth here. He's erroneous. He's fragmented himself. He's botched certain things together that don't really go together. He's basically eviscerated how history works. Then he's basically said that nothing really. I mean, it's crazy. He's absolutely said nothing. And somehow he's even getting applause, I think, because he just wants to sound smart and like he's talking down or being condescending. He's actually in every way everything that I think anybody would dislike about the image of white people that they have in their minds. He has become. What people don't understand, and I'm going to point this out to you very, very clearly, you have to understand this. If you make an image of someone, meaning if you formulate an image in your mind, like this man is doing, you become the image that's attributed to you. That's that you attribute to something else. You become it because it goes in your mind and you exhibit it and project it in your body. Okay? That's just how it works. There's no escaping that. That's just how it works. That's how numerous other things work. And clearly this gentleman is just another form of projectionist, which is propaganda. So I'll leave you with whatever happens here.
Okay. Okay.
Make sure you guys subscribe.
Change.
And make sure you guys subscribe and